You know what's better than silence. You know what's louder than revenge. It's growth. It's when the narcissist thought you'd stay broken, stay small, stay silent. But you evolved, and not just behind closed doors. You made it public. They didn't see it coming. Why? Because they underestimated the one thing that always destroys manipulation. Truth empowered by transformation. So let's talk about what happens when the one they tried to breaks free and makes it known. Let me tell you something powerful. Narcissists live off the illusion that they're the main character and you're just a disposable sidekick. But what they never expect is for the sidekick to rewrite the script, grab the mic and tell the truth. They count on your silence. They thrive in secrecy. They groom you to feel ashamed, afraid, unworthy. And then they walk away like nothing ever happened. But one day, after all the lies, the gaslighting, the character assassination, you stop hiding. You reclaim your voice, you start healing, you rise, and then you speak, not to get revenge, but to liberate yourself. And everyone else who's trapped in that same dark story, they didn't see that coming. You didn't just walk away, you built something new. You started telling your truth, not in whispers, not behind curtains, but publicly. And the moment you did that, the narcissist lost the one thing they feared most, control. Because now, your story is no longer in their hands. They can't twist it. They can't bury it. You're no longer a secret. You're no longer their puppet. You are the proof that people can escape the cycle and thrive. And you know what? That exposure, that raw, unapologetic truth, it burns through the illusions they built. You took back your power not by destroying them, but by building you. You didn't just heal. You evolved out loud. And when healing becomes public, so does their failure. This isn't about shaming. This is about freedom. This is about turning pain into power, scars into strategy, and silence into a roar. So if you're listening to this, if you've been through the manipulation, the gaslighting, the toxic fog, they may have fooled you for a season, but they didn't stop your story. And now it's your time to rise, not just in silence, but in strength. Stand up, speak out, not to punish the narcissist, but to free yourself and ignite others, because when the truth finally speaks, when the one they thought was broken steps forward and shines, that's when the narcissist realizes they never saw it coming. And you're just getting started. Narcissists build their power on manipulation, secrecy, and control. They weave a web of lies and half-truths, constructing an image of themselves as the victim, the hero, or the misunderstood genius. But none of this works unless you remain silent. Your silence is their shield. It allows them to continue the performance without contradiction. It gives them space to twist reality and reshape the narrative in their favor. They depend on you not speaking up, not sharing your truth, and certainly not revealing what really went on behind closed doors. Every time you doubt yourself, hesitate to share, or stay quiet to keep the peace, you unknowingly hand them more power. That's exactly how they sustain their illusion. They wear the mask of perfection while you suffer in silence. What makes this dynamic even more insidious is that they often program you to believe that speaking up is wrong. They convince you that if you talk about what happened, you're being dramatic, vindictive, or disloyal. They call it airing dirty laundry, when in truth, it's shedding light on darkness. Their entire identity is built around a persona they want others to believe. And if you break your silence, that carefully crafted illusion starts to crack. This is why they often escalate their tactics the moment they sense you might speak out. They panic, they attempt damage control, they may even launch a smear campaign to discredit you before your truth gets out. Why? Because if you speak, the whole false narrative they've created can unravel. They know the power of your voice even if you don't. Yet, that's why they manipulate you into staying quiet. They try to isolate you, instill shame, and drain your confidence. Because once you begin to see the pattern, once you begin to realize that your silence feeds their control, you become dangerous to them. The illusion only works as long as it goes unchallenged. Once truth enters the picture, Once you name the behavior, call out the manipulation, and refuse to play along, the power dynamic shifts. You were never weak. You were just convinced to stay quiet so they could stay strong. But the moment you break that silence, the entire illusion starts to collapse under its own weight. When you've been under the influence of a narcissist, your voice often becomes the first casualty. You're taught, subtly or aggressively, that your thoughts, feelings, and perceptions are invalid. You're told you're too sensitive, overreacting, misremembering. Over time, this erodes your confidence. You begin to second, guess yourself, shrink your presence, and suppress your truth just to keep the peace. But what you don't realize at first is that your voice is directly tied to your identity, your sense of self, and ultimately, your power. The longer you stay silent, the more disconnected you become from who you are. Reclaiming your voice doesn't happen overnight. It starts in small moments, writing down what you really feel, speaking to a trusted friend, setting one boundary, correcting a falsehood someone says about you. Each act of expression, no matter how small, becomes an act of defiance against the control you were once under. You're telling yourself and the world, my story matters, my truth is real. And that shift is powerful. Because once you begin to speak from a place of clarity and authenticity, the lies the narcissist built start to lose their grip. This isn't just about telling your side of the story. It's about realigning with your inner truth. When you've been silenced for so long, speaking becomes revolutionary. You realize that your voice was never the problem. It was their fear of being exposed that made them want to silence it. By reclaiming your voice, you begin to untangle the web of emotional manipulation they spun around you. You stop walking on eggshells, you stop minimizing your pain, and you stop carrying the burden of their insecurities. Reclaiming your voice also sends a message to others. You're no longer living in fear. You're stepping into the light. You're no longer accepting the role they assigned you. You are rewriting your narrative, and as your voice grows stronger, so does your power. Because power isn't about control, intimidation, or dominance. True power is grounded in truth, integrity, and presence. It's the ability to stand in your story without shame, without apology, and without the need for permission. Reclaiming your voice is the first bold step toward building a life where you're no longer controlled by fear, guilt, or the past. Narcissists rely on isolation and secrecy to maintain the version of reality they've crafted. As long as you're silent and hidden, they can portray you however they wish. Unstable, bitter, weak, or even abusive. They wear the mask of the calm, charming victim while painting you as the problem. It works when you stay behind the scenes, tending to your wounds quietly. But the moment you begin to heal, and do it publicly, their narrative begins to crack. Because healing in the open sends a message, you're no longer afraid and you're no longer carrying their shame. When you begin to share your truth with clarity, calmness, and strength, not from a place of vengeance, but from a place of growth, it terrifies the narcissist. Why? Because the power they once had over your reputation, your story, and your image starts to dissolve. People begin to see through the falsehoods. They see that the person standing tall, speaking clearly, and owning their past couldn't possibly be the distorted version the narcissist described. Public healing reclaims the version of your identity they tried to destroy. What's even more powerful is that you don't need to speak negatively about them to dismantle the narrative. Your very presence, whole, grounded, and unashamed, becomes evidence that something wasn't right in the story they told. You become a living contradiction to their lies. That's the threat. You don't have to accuse. You simply have to exist, grow, and share honestly. Healing in public removes the mystery. It brings light to places that were kept in darkness. The narcissist fears exposure more than anything else. Their identity is a mask held tightly in place by the silence of others. When you stop hiding and begin to thrive in front of the world, you challenge the illusion they so carefully crafted. And what's more, your story begins to inspire others. People who are silent start finding their voice. People still trapped in confusion begin to see the signs. Healing in public becomes more than just about you. It becomes a movement of truth. You no longer need to defend yourself, justify your choices, or prove anything. Your growth is the proof. Your peace is the testimony. Your authenticity is the undoing of every lie told about you. Growth is the narcissist's greatest fear, because it reveals everything they tried to keep buried. Your strength, your intelligence, your resilience, and most of all, their attempts to diminish all of it. When you were in the relationship or under their influence, they worked relentlessly to suppress your evolution. They undermined your confidence, sabotaged your progress, and made you question your worth. They didn't want you to grow because the more you evolved, the more their control faded. But the moment you start rising, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, they can no longer deny the truth. You were never the weak one. You were the threat all along. Growth doesn't scream, it doesn't argue, it simply is, and that quiet transformation speaks volumes. You begin showing up differently. You stop reacting to their games. You set boundaries and stick to them. You pursue goals they told you were unrealistic. You reclaim the parts of yourself they tried to erase. Every step forward you take silently exposes what they tried so hard to cover up, that they weren't the powerful one. They were just loud. You were the one with depth, value, and potential they couldn't handle. As you grow, people start noticing the contrast. They see the real you, not the version filtered through the narcissist's smear campaign. They see clarity in your eyes instead of confusion. They hear your story and recognize truth where the narcissist offered only drama and distortion. That's when the tables turn. Because no matter how many lies were spread, your evolution tells a story that can't be faked. It's visible, it's consistent, and it's undeniable. What makes your growth even more powerful is that it reveals their fear. They feared your voice, your truth, your power. Not because you were dangerous, but because you couldn't be controlled forever. The more you evolve, the more the mask they wear slips. People begin to ask questions. The inconsistencies in their stories start to show. They panic not because you're attacking them, but because your very transformation makes their manipulation transparent. You become the mirror they can't avoid. You reflect back to them everything they tried to deny or destroy. And while they stay stuck in cycles of control and illusion, you rise into a life built on authenticity, clarity, and purpose. When you begin to speak your truth after enduring narcissistic abuse, it's often misunderstood. Some may label it as bitterness, vengeance, or an inability to let go. But the reality is, speaking out is not an act of revenge. It's a declaration of freedom. For so long, you were silenced. Your reality was twisted. You were taught that expressing yourself was dangerous, selfish, or shameful. So you held it all in, carrying the weight of unspoken pain, confusion, and guilt. But the moment you choose to voice your truth without needing to hurt anyone, you're breaking the chains that held you captive. Speaking out is about reclaiming your reality. It's about validating your experience in a world where the narcissist tried to erase it. They conditioned you to believe that staying quiet kept the peace, but it didn't. It just preserved their control. When you finally start to tell your story, it's not to punish them, it's to release yourself. Every word you speak that reflects your authentic experience frees you from the emotional prison they built around you. You're no longer hiding, apologizing, or minimizing. You're stepping into your truth with courage. Liberation through speaking isn't loud or dramatic. It's often calm, clear, and deeply empowering. You're not shouting to be heard. You're sharing to be real. You're no longer afraid of who might believe you or what they'll say, because your healing no longer depends on their validation. It comes from within. Speaking out allows you to shed the false identity that was forced onto you and step back into who you really are: strong, aware, and awake. It also serves a greater purpose. When you speak up, others who have been silenced begin to see a path forward. Your voice gives them permission to question, to reflect, to heal. You become a source of light for those still trapped in the fog of narcissistic abuse. And as your truth ripples outward, it challenges the system of secrecy and shame that narcissists depend on. It disrupts the silence they count on to continue. You're not speaking to destroy, you're speaking to rebuild. You're not interested in revenge, you're invested in your rebirth. The words you once feared to speak now become your wings. They carry you out of the past and into a future where your truth stands tall, unashamed and unshaken. When you rise from the depths of narcissistic abuse, your journey becomes more than just personal healing. It becomes a lighthouse for others navigating the same darkness. Transformation after manipulation is powerful because it shows what's possible. It proves that the chains of emotional bondage can be broken. And while the narcissist counted on you staying down, silent, and invisible, your growth becomes undeniable. It becomes visible. And it starts inspiring others who feel hopeless, confused, or lost in the cycle of abuse. Many people don't even realize they're being manipulated until they see someone else break free. They might feel the pain, the anxiety, the self-doubt, but they haven't connected the dots. When you step into your truth and live it out loud, calmly, confidently, and authentically, you show them what freedom looks like. You show them that healing is real, that they're not crazy, and that they, too, can reclaim their life. Your transformation becomes a silent permission slip that says, you don't have to stay in the fog. You don't have to keep shrinking. You don't have to accept abuse disguised as love. You don't need to have a platform, a spotlight, or a huge audience to make this impact. Sometimes, the most powerful influence comes through the smallest acts. How you hold boundaries, how you carry yourself, how you no longer tolerate toxicity. The way you speak up, walk away, or simply glow with peace becomes a silent testimony. People notice. Even if they don't say it, they're watching. And for those still caught in the web of narcissistic manipulation, your example might be the first spark of hope they've felt in a long time. Your transformation tells a different story than the one the narcissist tried to assign you. They may have cast you as weak, unstable, or incapable, but now, your strength and clarity speak louder than any smear campaign. And when others witness this shift in you, it challenges what they believe about their own situation. It makes them question the narratives they've been fed. Your evolution becomes a mirror reflecting back possibility, courage, and truth. You become living proof that survival is not the end goal. Thriving is, that it's not only possible to heal, but to rise so completely that the past no longer defines you.